Bună ziua de aici, din foaierul Teatrului Național Marin Sorescu din Craiova. Suntem la Festivalul Internațional Shakespeare. Continuăm întâlnirile organizate de revista Teatrul Azi, iar primul invitat al zilei este profesorul Michael Dobson, specialist în studii shakespeariene, directorul Institutului Shakespeare din Anglia, a predat la Universitatea din Londra, Oxford și Harvard. Este un membru important în rețeaua culturală globală dedicată creației lui Shakespeare. În 2020 a fost laureatul premiului Festivalului Internațional Shakespeare din Craiova. A scris numeroase articole și cărți de specialitate despre creația shakespeariană în relație cu munca artiștilor de la scenă și este consultant al regizorilor și actorilor de la Royal Shakespeare Company și Flute Theatre în procesul de lucru pe textele lui Shakespeare. Professor, thank you very much for accepting our invitation today.
It's a privilege.
And I will start with an emotional invite. Do you have a core memory or maybe a soft spot that convinces you to come back every year to the festival, the Shakespeare Festival in Craiova?
Absolutely. I have a deep sentimental attachment to Craiova. I get weepy thinking about it. You know, every 2 years there is this extraordinary celebration of everything I value, pretty much. And it makes life worth living in between. Yes, I first came to this festival in 2010, that amazing year when many flights were stopped because a volcano went off in Iceland. And the festival was productions of Hamlet from all over the world. Every single show was a Hamlet. A play which I had already seen, of course, many times. Many of them in English, and every single production was a totally different show, a totally different play. It was a revelation. And I had the great luxury and joy of seeing the Thomas Ostermeyer Hamlet with Lars Eidinger, and being in the Hotel Jewel, which stood on the site of what is now the Ramada. I think the Hotel Jewel probably fell down of its own accord sometime after 2010. Getting up in the morning, going down for breakfast, and being in a breakfast room full of Hamlets. All of them saying, "Oh, I thought your Hamlet was wonderful. No, I preferred your Hamlet." And you know, seeing people like Jon Karamitru, Michael Pennington, Lars Eidinger, all in one place, all talking about Hamlet. This was absolutely extraordinary. It was such a privilege to be eating the breakfast. The coffee, I remember being terrible. But the productions, and seeing the productions side by side in a short space of time, it was a fabulous introduction to Craiova. I became very attached to the city. There are people I just met at random who I've seen every 2 years ever since, one of whom, Lily, I had a picnic with watching Midsummer Night's Dream in a park yesterday. Yes, I will always come back to Craiova. That year, in 2010, I vowed to Emil Borghina that while I was fit enough to do so, I would never miss the Craiova Festival for the rest of my life. So far, I have kept that vow. I intend to go on trying.
Do you have a favorite place in Craiova?
A favorite place? Oh, I have many. I love the park, Nicolae Romanescu. I love the Castelul Fermecat down there, this sort of version of an English Gothic folly. You know, I love landscape gardening. You know, I'm very interested in Shakespeare gardens, among other things. So yeah, I will always go there. Anywhere that's serving good tripe soup. And I have found a restaurant. I will not advertise it here because, you know, I'm trained on the BBC where you're not allowed to mention anything.
It's a good training, I guess.
Yeah. Anyway, ciorbe de burtă, you know, I first had in Romania way back then, and I will always look for good ciorbe de burtă while I'm here. And I have found a reliable supplier this time round where I will be eating a great deal of it.
This year's festival theme is Will Matters.
Yeah.
What's your take on this?
Absolutely. Will matters profoundly. And part of my job is reminding people who might do anything about the state of the world that Shakespeare is an enormously important tool of cultural dialogue and cultural diplomacy and mutual understanding. That this is an art form that is all about articulating different viewpoints plurally alongside each other. That's why Shakespeare's plays have held up so long, because they don't editorialize. They just show you lots of different people in dialogue with one another, shaping each other, transforming each other, going through change together and in opposition to each other, that it's all about dialogue. I mean, this is why I've been so keen to be involved when the United Nations has done an annual Shakespeare broadcast on its television channel for the last 3 years. It's why I've been so keen to help establish, back in England, an all-party parliamentary group on Shakespeare, which is now chaired by Stratford's marvellous current Member of Parliament. And it's so rare to be able to sound enthusiastic about a politician. But Stratford currently has an MP called Dr. Manuela Pertegella. She is a European, she's of Italian extraction. She used to be an academic. She specializes in Italian translations of Shakespeare. I think this is the first time Stratford has actually had an MP who has actually read all the Shakespeare canon. You know, Manuela comes to the Shakespeare Institute and uses the library. You know, she goes and looks at our Italian translations of Shakespeare. She is a fantastically intelligent person to talk about Shakespeare to the Ministry of Education, to the Ministry of Culture in Parliament, you know, to make it part of the national agenda. We've just been carrying out an inquest into the current state of Shakespeare education in Britain. You know, we're trying to actually remind endlessly anybody with funding that the arts matter, that the arts are absolutely vital to, you know, an inspected life, an articulated way of being a citizen.
Since you had the experience to see Shakespeare through the eyes of so many different cultures, is there a limit where Shakespeare stops being Shakespeare anymore? Or is this relevant anymore?
I'm not sure how important that is. After all, some of Shakespeare's plays are written collaboratively. Some of them aren't strictly Shakespeare in the first place. As my colleague Tiffany Stern has been pointing out, Elizabethan playwrights helped promote ballads to plug their plays, so there were always other art forms, popular art forms, spilling out from the plays. They're not finished, complete, closed-off monuments that are supposed to stay how they are forever. Shakespeare's plays can only live through interacting with adapters, artists, actors, directors. They don't stay the same. They were never pure in the first place. They were always mixed up with people selling beer and actors selling themselves and all these, you know, the actual business of the present moment in which the play is happening is the most important thing about the play. It's more important than whether they're speaking the dialogue exactly the way it was spoken in 1592. So I do not worry at all about, I don't think there's a limit on where it stops being Shakespeare. You know, there are all kinds of things that are done in the name of Shakespeare that don't have very much to do with Shakespeare, like selling cardboard cutouts of Shakespeare's mother's house. But I'm not going to stop the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust from doing that. It's, you know, it's part of the sort of pilgrimage business on which Stratford depends. And, you know, there's some fabulous Shakespeare souvenirs being sold in this very building. And,
yes, that's true.
You know, I'm not going to knock that.
I'm wondering what specific qualities did you discover in Eastern European performers and theatre companies that are different than English or American actors? And is there something specific for Romanian actors that is different than Hungarians or Ukrainians?
Yeah, That's a very intriguing one, Irina. And they have the huge advantage that all actors doing Shakespeare not in English have, which is that they're always doing a new translation, they're always doing a new play, they're always doing the words in a way that the audience haven't heard before, that's been chosen for that particular show. You know, English actors often feel a bit burdened by the fact that because Shakespeare's plays are old, they sound a bit like the most famous translations of the Bible. They're part of a heritage industry as far as some people are concerned, and you know, they're in danger of sounding like something that's been dusted off from a museum and trotted out once again. So they've got, you know, Romanian actors always have that going for them. Ion Karamitru always used to say that the great thing about Romanian for Shakespeare is that you can pretty much do the rhythm of iambic pentameter, that you can get a better verse translation in Romanian. I mean, I'd have to defer to my friend George Volchanov on that point, who did the translation for Percorete at the Lear last night. One thing I think is striking is that in Eastern Europe, the cult of the director survives in a way that it doesn't quite in the Anglophone theatre anymore. Anglophone directors, by and large, have to convince their actors that their actors thought up all the ideas that they're imposing, whereas I think it's much more usual still in Eastern Europe for the director to be able to tell the actors, look, I want you to do it like this. You know, you're not supposed to do that in the Anglophone theatre. You're supposed to allow the actors to discover things, or, you know, make the actors...
Be more rather a coordinator.
Well, you pose as just as a facilitator, even though you are deliberately flattering this actor or criticizing that actor or undermining that actor to make sure that they fit in with the set design that you chose months before the rehearsal started. So there's that. I think Romanian actors tend to be very good with language. They're very good at they're very interested in embodying the words. That I find very powerful. How I would distinguish Romanian actors from Hungarian, apart from the fact that I understand more of what they're saying because it's a Romance language, I'm not sure, because of course one only can watch from one's own cultural position. I've got used to seeing Shakespeare in Romanian because I've had the luxury of coming here every 2 years. I've seen so many productions of Shakespeare with Romanian surtitles that, you know, I'm used to there being certain phrases that I've seen in Romanian. There's a great range within Romania of different kinds of Shakespeare, but because there are these big subsidized state theatres in each major city who have big stages and want to still do big-scale productions, this is a place I come expecting a certain level of spectacle and a certain level of directorial concept, where you might not get that elsewhere. You know, you might not have the budget, you might not have a big proscenium stage. It was very interesting seeing Percorete making a three-sided space for himself when, you know, what I've enjoyed about Percorete in the past has been these very pictorial spectacles that you're a bit distanced from. But here, for once, these actors with a certain amount of white makeup were, you know, close to the audience, sometimes addressing the audience, surrounded by the audience in a quite different way.
I was wondering, because we discussed earlier about you seeing King Lear's made by Percorete, and I was wondering if you felt that those small accents of irony within the performance, is that something new or something that as a reading, as a directorial reading? Because I didn't expect to have moments of slightly smiling at King Lear. Yeah, well, I mean, Shakespeare always depicts human beings who may or may not have a sense of humour or a sense of black comedy in situations
in the comedies that may or may not lead to betrothals, in tragedies, in situations that are going to lead to people getting killed. There may well be laughs along the way. Yeah. There's much more black comedy usually in Hamlet than there is in King Lear. I mean, there's such extraordinary things happen in King Lear, and poor Tom says such bizarre things that you know, there's a lot of it. It's not something I expected from Percorete. I mean, I admit, thinking, well, perhaps this is, you know, King Lear, it's a logical play to come back to after you've had such a spectacular success with Titus. Mm-hmm. But I mean, Percorete's Titus was kind of full-on, you know, trauma all the way through. And the Lear, you know, it's quite, in some ways, it's quite light. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's full of ideas, it's full of brilliant little touches, but it's not about somebody's titanic rage and despair. It's not really about anger at the entire system in the way that I was expecting, which I found, you know, very fascinating, very fascinating. And it's not an operatic, weepy Lear. You know, normally I would think, if I'm not crying during the scene where Lear recognizes Cordelia after the storm, I want my money back. You know, last night I didn't feel teary at all at any point in the show, and I sort of miss that, but at the same time I respect a very cerebral reading of the play, a very kind of almost medical diagnosis of these two very messed up families full of very strange people, and this kind of almost posthumous fantasy at the end as to how it all might just carry on anyway. Perhaps that's even more despairing than the pile of corpses and the audience devastated and nobody really knowing what to say who's left alive in the cast.
I felt that I really enjoyed the performance thanks to the simplicity of the tragedy. Yeah. The Gloucester and Lear scene. Yeah. I found it very touching because it was so simply made. Yes. And I think that's a very good metaphor for human experience.
Absolutely. It was almost more realist than I was expecting from Percorete.
I agree.
Lots of props, lots of costume, you know, lots of amazing touches. Yeah, and almost 19th century theatre with those 19th century costumes. And some fabulous touches. I absolutely loved Regan, for once, not sending a letter to Edmund, but sending him her bra as a love token. I thought that was a brilliant touch.
So that was an efficient, concise detail.
Yeah, that really said everything you needed to know about that relationship in a very vivid way.
Should a director be loyal to the text in the sense that should protect something valuable in it, or should follow his own or her own?
You have to make, your duty to the text is to make it live, whatever that takes. You know, if you want to be loyal to the text, just reprint it in a book. You know, your job is to make a live event, something that's really happening in the imaginations, in the hearts of your actors and your audience, connected. And if that means, you know, you can't be you don't have the problem of being faithful to the words if you're using a translation anyway. And people working in English are kind of translating the words if they're unfamiliar, obsolete words, even if they're only doing it in their own heads and they're still speaking them. The most unfaithful thing you can do to Shakespeare is just recite the text just as it's printed so that it doesn't mean very much, or just let it be a sort of reading from scripture. You know, if it's boring, if it's not connecting, then that's the thing you've got wrong. You need to make it a new play again, like it was when it was first staged. And I thought Percorete does that.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
I was wondering, since now people are using artificial intelligence a lot. And now the large language models can write sonnets like Shakespeare-like.
Well, except they're not. I mean, you can tell.
Yeah, they try to mimic, and people believe that they can at some point maybe evolve enough to do it. My question is, using AI now is a limiting instrument for creativity, or it will open a world for us, a new next level?
Yeah.
Because everyone is complaining that nothing is original anymore in creativity. And they're using the excuse to use artificial instruments.
Well, I mean, people have been making that complaint since Plato, that there's just imitation, and you know, nobody actually.
And it is an imitation.
Of course, I mean, you know, people imitate, artists, if you're lucky, renew. What a computer is not going to do is renew anything. It seems to me that what AI can do, especially around the live theatre, is very peripheral. I mean, you might cut some corners designing the scenery, but a computer is not going to replace a live actor actually speaking to a live audience. I mean, we could delegate the whole thing and just have simulacra of actors and a simulacra of an audience while we go off and do something else, but that seems to me a deeply futile and despairing exercise. I don't feel that AI is really going to get anywhere near the middle of what Shakespeare is and what Shakespeare's for. You can use AI to simulate not very good Shakespeare criticism quite well, but then who needs that stuff anyway? If it's not interesting enough that it can be simulated and imitated and pastiched by a computer, then why are you bothering with it in the first place? You know, the stuff that AI can do is the stuff that's not worth bothering with, it seems to me. You might well use mechanical assistants to design a poster, but it's not. I don't think it gets any near the middle of experience.
Maybe it's the hype of the novelty of this technology.
Yeah.
I know that there are parts in the world, I think in Europe especially, where there are projects using AI as actors, and they are training the AIs to act and interact with the public as if...
Given the choice, would you rather talk with a human being or talk with a computer that has just been told to imitate human responses? I mean, of course you would. Why would you pay to see AI actors? And how is that ever going to be as cheap as a human actor?
I don't know if it will ever be cheaper.
Only about 3% of all the trained actors in the world are in work at any given moment. There is not a problem getting affordable human beings to act for you. There really isn't. I speak feelingly. One of my children is an actor. You know, employ my child. You know, don't use a computer. It's so much better.
And it's so much unpredictable. A human being is more unpredictable than a machine.
Yeah. Absolutely.
No matter how fast it can readjust to reality. So
exactly.
I guess.
We have really interesting software glitches that make us particularly interesting to see live.
The festival changed a lot lately. We were discussing about this. Yeah. But at the beginning, it had this extraordinary program of great performances made by very important directors. And now slowly it shifts to a different objective, which is connecting communities, and it has a really great program around that. Yeah. What does this festival do for the community when it expands from the walls of the National Theatre?
Yeah, well, I think I'm deeply impressed by what Craiova has done to embrace Shakespeare in every possible way it can think of, and I'm very much involved in what in the Anglophone world is called applied Shakespeare. You know, not just using the plays to create brilliant stage productions for people who like brilliant stage productions, but using the plays therapeutically and to bring people together in different projects. I'm working to make a Shakespeare garden in Lviv with war veterans in Ukraine. I'm a trustee of Flute Theatre, who of course yesterday were doing their wonderful 12th night games with autistic people and their families. I think that's extraordinary work. So to see the core of the festival being masterpieces on great stages, but to see these concentric rings of ways in which the whole city can be engaged is, I think, a marvelous thing. I think it's impossible once a festival gets large for the percentage of masterpieces to remain as high as it was in 1994 when there were only 2 shows. One of them was Percoritis Titus, the other one was Cheek by Jowls As You Like It. You're never going to get an entire program that is, that level ever again. But, that's fine. It's using Shakespeare to bring people together, to motivate activity, is fascinating. What I would love to know is what happens in Craiova in between festivals, because Stratford-upon-Avon, which is my problem, Stratford-upon-Avon has been one continuous Shakespeare festival ever since 1769, when David Garrick held his Shakespeare Jubilee there. So the problem of how you keep renewing Shakespeare and keep people engaged with Shakespeare and use Shakespeare as part of civic life and civic identity is one that is perpetually in front of us. And keeping up the standard of what is being done with Shakespeare across many, many media. The Shakespeare Institute, of which I'm director, we're an academic university research department, but we're also an art gallery. I mean, we've got a great collection of Shakespeare art, some of which is reproduced in an exhibition that's in one of the university foyers just over there at this very moment. There's a Shakespeare and Music Festival, of which I'm a trustee, that happens now in Stratford every year. There are Shakespeare film showings. We teach courses on Shakespeare in digital media. We too need to keep Shakespeare alive in all the ways, and in all the ways that these contagious stories and contagious debates want to spread themselves out and get themselves into individual lives and into collective life. So I really would like to know where all these stimuli that happen over 10 days go in the intervening 2 years before the next fabulous 10 days.
I presume now they are testing out how to control the event, because it's a really big change for the whole team. To supervise everything that's happening around the city. But I guess that having a continuous presence of Shakespeare all over the year might be the next level and the obvious one, and I think the possibilities are endless. I think that it's a great and important segment, the one that refers to social interaction and inviting more people in amateur theatre.
Yes, indeed.
And I'm wondering, how do you see people change after they start working with Shakespeare, although they're not professionals?
Oh, it's very enabling, I think. It produces very intense bonds between people. When you've confronted death together, even when you're only pretending, or when you've all pretended to flirt with each other in a magic forest, and it's, I speak feelingly. My family have been engaged in amateur theatre for a long time. I wrote a whole book about Shakespeare and amateur performance, and I'm very interested to know what the amateur scene is like in Romania, because I know a lot about amateur productions of Shakespeare in England, but there are some cultures that just won't do it. I mean, try and talk to the French about amateur participation in the arts, and it's you have to do it professionally. You have to have a special cadre of highly trained people to do that stuff. It's disgusting that people would. It's ludicrous that people should.
I think they left behind theatre for amateurs after communists went away, because they were playing small plays in factories. So that might be a reminiscence of those years and a way to survive the daily grey existence. But right now there is a very big branch of young people that play. We have a festival dedicated to teenagers that play theatre, and I think that's an amazing place to do that?
Well, one of the things that we've done at the Institute is we have a collaboration in China with Nanjing University called the Shakespeare Center China, and we have set up a pan-Chinese student Shakespeare performance competition. I was just this is fresh in my mind because I was in Beijing recently being one of the judges of the finals and seeing these Chinese students, some of them as young as 13, performing scenes from Shakespeare, both in their own translations and also in English, some of them. And it's really fascinating because whereas in Britain, a student performance competition would be things students had done in their spare time. Students would be directing, it would be all about the students just wanting to do it for fun or for recreation or for their own improvement. In China, you're essentially judging faculty members. You know, these students have been told, oh, there's a competition, it might win prestige for the university, you will be in this play.
It's an order.
So it's not, in a way, it's not in any way amateur. It's not, and you know, one hopes to foment actual play, but one's never quite sure that that's what one's looking at when one sees these finals.
Which are the newest projects or research you conduct at the Institute?
We each do a lot of research. I mean, you know, we're individual scholars. We have our own things that we're questing about, and certain interests that we all have in common and that we engage with. We're very interested in what happens to Shakespeare in the rest of the world, because the nice thing about Stratford is that people come on pilgrimage to Stratford from all over the world, and if they're scholars, they'll look in at the Institute, we'll get them to give a talk. We bring in visiting scholars who want to be based in Stratford, and using our wonderful library and using the main university's wonderful library in Birmingham, and being in the archives of the Royal Shakespeare Company and the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust. I'm particularly excited about what we're doing in Ukraine, because we're twinned with Ivan Franko National University in Lviv. So I've been very involved with Rostislav Derzhapilsky's festival in Ivano-Frankivsk, which is not far from Lviv, and he's here today. He brought his Romeo and Juliet to the last festival, which I think is a fabulous show. We have a fellowship, we co-teach on things. I teach a course on Shakespeare internationally, which has a whole week on Ukraine, where we use materials and videos of Ukrainian productions, and we are making, in collaboration, a Shakespeare garden in Lviv by the Drama Building, in memory of a great Ukrainian theatre historian called Maya Harbachuk of the Ukrainian Shakespeare Center, who she stayed with me and my wife at our Elizabethan house when my wife was trying to design our Elizabethan garden. And my wife is a great scholar, Nicola Watson. She's a great scholar of Shakespeare gardens. And Maya came up with the idea that there should be a garden which not only celebrated Shakespeare, but also celebrated Ivan Franko, who, as well as being a great politician and a great nationalist, translated Shakespeare and wrote prefaces to Shakespeare. So this garden is going to include an open-air stage and plants that refer to the Shakespeare canon and plants that refer to the Ivan Franko canon. And we're applying for funding, and we're going to have Ukrainian war veterans therapeutically working on the garden and doing things in it, which we have a great garden at the Shakespeare Institute with which it will be twinned. I've already been planting sunflowers in the Shakespeare Institute garden in Stratford around the bust of Shakespeare, because the sunflower is the emblem of Ukraine and it's the emblem of Ivan Franko. So that's a project I'm very engaged with. Lviv is fabulous.
And that's a gentle project. So with a touch of gentleness, actually.
Gardening's a more violent task than you think. I mean, when you've really dealt with large climbing roses, it's physical work, and they tear you to pieces, and you know. But,
just like in theatre,
exactly.
The audience sees only beauty, but the work behind.
There's a lot of heavy objects to be moved from one place to another.
We were talking about the importance of festivals in a world of tension and aggressivity. Will theatre save us in a way. In a way.
Well, they keep me alive, so I can only speak from my own experience. You know, I get from one production to another, you know, in the hope of, you know, being in touch with these plays and these people and new ideas. Works fine for me. The great thing about Shakespeare's plays, because they're unresolved debates, they start conversations. You know, everybody wants to talk about, you know, like you this morning. Well, what did you make of Percarates, Leah? You know, what did you think was happening in this bit? What did you think was going on here? You know, why did this happen? You know, and you know, why is Hamlet in a toilet cubicle in Hamlet toilet? All these, you know, these are plays that spin off and that keep people talking to one another. It can't do any harm, you know, compared to so many other things. You know, Shakespeare is not invested in borders. He is absolutely not a nationalist, no matter what some English sort of heritage fanatics will say about Shakespeare being all to do with thatched cottages and beating the Spanish Armada. Yeah, that's not really what these plays are about. Everybody speaks the same language pretty much in Shakespeare, and when they don't, it's quite funny. It's you know, maybe in Henry V there are some serious problems, but because the audience need to understand all the characters, everybody, whether they're Roman or Egyptian or Italian, they all speak the same language, because the plays have become so famous all around the world, they've become themselves a common language. And I think, yeah, if they'll save us a lot sooner than a lot of other things are going to save us, if anything does. And by the way, I absolutely love the recycling bins that say to be for things that are to be recycled and not to be for the things that are going to landfill. That's a very nice touch.
Send them to nothingness.
Yeah.
For someone that never read Shakespeare or doesn't know anything about him, should they start reading Shakespeare, or should they just go to a performance?
Go to a show. I mean, you know, Shakespeare wrote his plays for people who'd never seen them before. They were just going to come to the theatre and have an amazing experience. You know, come to see a really good production of Shakespeare. If it's the plays, I mean, if it's the sonnets, or if it's the narrative poems like Venus and Adonis or Lucrece, maybe read them. But actually, even Venus and Adonis has been marvellously dramatized by Gregory Doran, and we're going to see it staged with puppets here on the last day of the festival, which I love that show. I saw it when Greg first did it. I'm so pleased it's coming. I spent years begging Greg Doran to bring an RSC show to Craiova. And rather belatedly, now that he no longer works for the RSC, he's revived this RSC puppet show and has brought it to Craiova to start its international renewed life. And I think that's wonderful.
So this is one of the productions you're looking forward to see again?
Yeah.
And one that you didn't see and you want to see?
Well, I mean, today I'm seeing Tang Shu Wing's Othello. And I'm intrigued. I mean, Tang Shu Wing's a fascinating director. His silent King Lear, his King Lear without words, the last festival, was one of the most disturbing things. And of course, he's never going to say, this is about politics, this is about not being allowed to speak in Hong Kong, because that would not be a politic thing to do. But I thought it was compelling. He did an amazing Titus, he did a wonderful Macbeth. With the umbrellas, and it might rain. The umbrellas don't mean, who said anything that this was about Hong Kong politics? Certainly not. It was a great show. So I'll be fascinated to see what he does at Colibri later today. He's a very important theatre maker.
I love that the main theme of all our discussions is that everyone invite people to come open-minded to theatre. Yeah. Thank you very much, Professor, for being
Irina.
here. And we will continue our meetings from now. Dragilor, vă mulțumim foarte mult că ați fost alături de noi. Revista Teatrul Azi, publicată de Uniter prin Fundația Culturală Camil Petrescu și finanțată de Ministerul Culturii, vă așteaptă și la ora 12:30, când colegii mei vor avea noi invitați care să povestească despre experiența lor la Festivalul Shakespeare. Vă mulțumesc pentru atenție și să ne vedem cu bine la teatru!